So, hey, everybody, welcome back. We've got Tara Eves, Senior Investigator with PHENIX on. Hey, Tara, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing really well. Another exciting day in the life. Appreciate you hopping on. I'm going to hop right into it. So just, this is your first time on. Just kind of introduce yourself, talk about what you do at PHENIX, and maybe if you think it's relevant, kind of talk about where you came from before PHENIX.
Okay. So I have been in the field now for about 7 years. I went to college for criminal justice. I got my degree. And when I was in the process of finishing up that degree, I found out the school I was actually attending offered a course for PIs because the state I lived in at that time had a licensed PI course. So that is something I've always been interested in. And I said, hey, let's give it a try. Took the course, fell in love with the career, and haven't looked back since.
So, what's interesting is a lot of investigators I talk to kind of fall into it, leaving a different career. You've got Joel, who's like a golf teaching professional. What led you to be interested in doing this from the beginning? What do you think caused you to be interested in criminal justice and PI?
Well, ever since I was little, I always wanted to be in either law enforcement or be an attorney. And it was just always a passion of mine. I love helping people. I love being able to give people answers that they cannot readily find on their own. So,
Well, I mean, boy, like PI is a pretty good intersection between law enforcement and attorney in terms of the types of stuff you deal with. So, not a bad spot to be in.
definitely not take the best of both worlds almost.
Yeah. So you went to school for criminal justice, you got out, got into PI. You're relatively new at PHENIX, like just coming up on a year. How has it been going from your previous PI firm to PHENIX? What's different? What's the same? What's it like?
So, my past role was at a much smaller agency, um, just a couple men, under five of us. And we handled a lot of domestics, a lot of child custody, a lot of criminal events that happened too, because where I started was in New Orleans, Louisiana. And then when I came to Phoenix, there is much more. There's special investigations, corporate fraud, there's asset investigations. And I just couldn't pass up the opportunity to learn so much more. I had already learned a lot previously, but I knew there was an opportunity here at Phoenix.
Yeah, that's kind of this consistent feedback. The sports analogy I always seem to come to. It seems like PHENIX is sort of like going up to the big leagues. You're dealing with a lot more like B2B, high profile corporate stuff. You came from New Orleans, which is obviously a completely different environment from, the world PHENIX operates in. What is the wildest, kind of most emotionally driven case you can remember from New Orleans?
I would say is when we helped recover a baby from a homeless couple. The couple who was helping with the investigation, who was our client, they had an emergency custody order for the baby. And at that time, NOPD, which is New Orleans Police Department, would not assist. They kept saying it was a civil matter, even though we had the order signed by the judge that this baby needed to be removed. So we had to find them. They were squatting in a abandoned home in New Orleans, and we had to speak with them. We spent hours speaking with the couple, the parents of the baby, to get them to civilly hand over the baby to their other family member because the baby was not in a good environment. The house had no electricity.
God, some of this stuff just pulls at the heartstrings so hard. How do you
Definitely.
manage to, like, do something like that during the day and kind of try and compartmentalize that when you go kind of off shift? How does that work for you?
Well, in that case, it was a very happy ending. We got the baby. The baby's safe. The baby has a loving home. And that was just a very happy ending, so there wasn't much to compartmentalize on that one. I would say that the whole process was nerve-wracking,
Yeah,
but it was a great experience, and I was very happy to be a part of that.
that's a beautiful thing. Are you still dealing with, domestics off and on at PHENIX, or are you mostly on the B2B corporate special investigations?
So I'm mostly on special investigations. We definitely do handle domestics at Phoenix, but I mostly handle special investigations. So that could be anything of locating a long lost friend.
Phoenix World, when you guys say special investigations, that's sort of just a catch all bucket when there's a big need that's sort of outside the bounds of using public records and like what creates a special investigation in your world?
I would say a special investigation is classified when traditional methods aren't going to get the job done. So, for example, if somebody wants a background check on someone, sure, mostly you can use regular investigative techniques. Well, then they want to know more information. They want to know information about previous lawsuits, what happened with other family members. They really want to go in depth and learn this person's character, their morals, etc. So that's really going to classify it as a special investigation at that point, because then you're not just looking and making lists of, oh, here's all their court records, here's what they've done. You're going into it, you have to talk to the family members, you have to know what kind of questions to ask them. So it really kind of pulls at every aspect of investigations. So when it becomes a special, you're really doing a little bit of a locate, a background check, you're doing your interviews, you might be doing something on the asset side, depending on what it is. We've had a lot involving crypto. There's honestly, it's like a little piece of every single investigation. And that's why I love them, because they're so diverse, they're so challenging.
Yeah, you're kind of, I take you as like the subject matter expert on, locate a person. And a lot of what Phoenix is able to do is you have all of these interdisciplinary experts. So when you need to touch in, every area of expertise, you have the resources to deliver. Was it like collaborating with other investigators and departments at Phoenix when you came from a world where it was kind of like smaller and you against the world?
Oh, I love it. I love reaching out to everybody, um, seeing their expertise, seeing their viewpoint on it, because to me, the more eyes on a case, the better it's going to be conducted. I mean, we're going to get different points of view. We're going to get different ways to tackle the case. I absolutely love the teamwork.
Yeah, it's definitely like the sum is greater than the parts in this world. I want to go back to something you hit on. When you say special investigations are when you go past traditional investigative methods. In the world of locate a person, what do you consider the traditional investigative methods?
So I would say the traditional locate would be to run somebody in our databases, which, we're privy to. And then honestly, that's almost all they do. And that's what a lot of other firms do. They'll just run them through their database and say, oh, well, here you go. Here's their address. They don't look into it. They don't actually go and verify it. They don't do anything extra. And that's what sets Phoenix apart from a lot of others. We actually verify that this is a person and this is where they are. So
When I had my early conversations with Brian, one of the first things he said when I say like, "So how are you guys different?" He said, "You'll understand later, but we start where other investigation firms stop." This sounds like a textbook example of that idea where you've gotten the database search and the box is checked, and then you need more. So you describe a situation where a traditional investigation firm would do a database search, which, you'll start with typically, but you'll go further than that. What are some things you're doing to take the investigation further and surface more information?
that database report is our starting point, like we just talked about. So say I have a PO box listed for somebody. Most investigators would be like, oh, end of the road. There's nothing I can do here. But those investigators that really investigate, they know how to get a reverse address off a PO box. So that is a major tool that not a lot of people know about. And it is so helpful when trying to find somebody, especially to serve. So if you have, legal documents for them, you're allowed to request this PO box and they'll give you the address behind it because you have that legal purpose. Some other things and other kinds of locates that sets us apart and just really sets that bar a lot higher is when we're trying to locate an individual. Say they come to us with only their name, their vehicle, license plate. Okay, I can locate somebody by looking for any license plate sightings. So once we run that program and I can see if the vehicle has any LPR cameras, so license plate recognition cameras, then we can kind of get a pattern of what area they might be in or what areas they frequent, just depending on what exactly we're trying to locate them for.
You hit on something that a couple of the other investigators, obviously I typically, I'm talking to the seniors on this podcast. You get the hard ones. What is the hardest, longest case that you've worked at Phoenix? Is there anything that comes to mind? Like what challenges you professionally?
The hardest, longest case I've had at Phoenix so far was a very big one. We were locating family members, and they were under the impression that they lived in the US, but they weren't actually sure. And once I started digging further into it, and this was 5 family members we're talking about, it was found that most of them actually lived in Canada.
Hmm.
So it turned into an international investigation to locate all these individuals. And that was very challenging because every province and territory in Canada has different laws and privacy laws that they have to abide by. So there's no just database where I can just type something in. It is all OSINT and true investigative techniques.
Okay, so that's one where with the information that the client brings to you, you're operating off some assumptions that you later found to be wrong
Yes.
that add another layer of challenge to that.
Yes.
How do you navigate international cases? Obviously, there's nuance state to state within the United States, but how does that work with you going internationally? What kind of resources do you use to make sure you're following other countries' regulations?
So when it comes to international cases, OSINT is your best friend. That is the way to find things out. Um, Luckily, most web pages will auto translate to English. I've had another case where I've had to locate an individual in Brazil just off their first name, and I was able to do that all with OSINT.
So, can you, again, like I'm in fifth grade, describe OSINT?
So what OSINT is, it's open source intelligence, and basically that is readily available information on the internet.
So, yeah, there's an element of using what is available to people like myself just in a more sophisticated, experienced way. And then there's a layer of the internet that 99% of users don't ever see or interact with because there's no need or reason. Were you aware of the second layer of the internet before you got into investigations?
Yeah, I was aware of it, but I didn't ever have a reason to access it before, didn't know exactly how to access it, and now I do. So it tends to be handled in a lot of our investigations, honestly.
So, would you consider yourself more of a technology driven investigator or out in the field?
No, I would say I'm more 50-50. So I definitely love my technology and I use it every time I can. But I also love going out into the field. I love doing the interviews myself. I love speaking with the individuals, finding everybody. So that's all I did the first few years I was a PI. I did field work for, oh, 60 plus hours a week, just sitting on surveillance. So I have both sides of it.
What is your day to day like? I know that's probably, it depends wildly, but if you're on an investigation where you're on, say you're on a long surveillance looking to locate a person, what does your communication look like with the client throughout this process?
So just depending on the client, we always let them know when we're going to go out. We will update them usually about midday. Again, just depending on the client. If the client requests, hey, I would love to be updated regularly every hour or so, then we will completely abide by that. Um, and then at the end of the day, of course, we're going to give them a summary of what happened. Now, if you're talking about anything to where, say it's a cheating spouse, we're not going to give information of any active infidelity going on. So say there is a female in the room, in the hotel room with the client's husband. We're not going to give them that information because we don't want to compromise anybody's safety. We will give them the information afterwards, but we definitely keep them updated. So it just depends on the type of case.
Oh boy, yeah, I didn't think about that. Giving too much information while something is happening live could create a dangerous and dramatic situation, so you have to keep that in.
Very much so. You have to be very careful with that.
So obviously, you have just such an it depends sort of job because you wanna be responsive to how the client wants to be, communicated with. You wanna be responsive to the situation from, like, the safety perspective, so you have to make a lot of, experience-driven judgments day to day, hour to hour.
Oh, definitely. Um, there are a lot of factors, and it's with every investigation of how different it's going to be. So overthinking comes into play a lot here. And it's great because then you can think about all the angles.
Well, I mean, if you're sitting in a car for, 5 days, you've got a lot of time to overthink. So I kind of want to wrap with this. So at Phoenix, like, what do you think is the most interesting case that you've dealt with at Phoenix?
I would say the most interesting case I have worked, and I am still currently working because there are so many layers to it. We're constantly being able to find new avenues to continue investigating. Is an extortion case, and it actually went international, where somebody was approached in a hotel room in a different country, and they were told that they owed these individuals hundreds of millions of dollars. And obviously, the poor individual had no idea what they were talking about and no idea why or who these people even were and how they got into their hotel room. So that one has been very intense and very interesting
That's
so far.
terrifying.
Yes, it is.
So that happened internationally?
Yes, and, the individual actually found trackers on their luggage as well.
Is this a high net worth individual, I would assume?
Correct.
Okay, so they were specifically targeted by some sort of criminal organization or individuals.
It was a group of individuals, I wouldn't call them a criminal organization, but it was a group of individuals that had some ties to them through a previous employee of the individual who was targeted.
Tara, it was awesome coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time out of a busy day, especially when you're in the middle of a lot of investigations. Appreciate you coming on. It was awesome. You did great. So thanks. Looking forward to continuing the conversation next time.
Thank you.